Welcome to Hermit Woods, where there's a story in every bottle.
Here we are.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It's Monday again.
And look at this. We have something in our glass.
We didn't waste
right
any
off the
time
bat.
today.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't.
I didn't have a beer earlier either.
No, you would never do that.
Never do that.
Neither did I.
So we've been planning this episode for months. Really excited about this. We've been
Scheduling it,
Coming up with
notes, everything that we
ideas
wanted to
and-
cover and all that. It's not as if we were scrambling in an orchard this
at
afternoon.
8 o'clock this morning,
Yeah.
texting back and
Yeah.
forth. What are we going to talk about today? No, that would never happen. We're always very organized about this. So
You know what's amazing to me is, and we're going to tell you the story today on our show here. It started back in 2007. Found this little tree, this little apple growing on a tree in Bob's front yard. And now in 2021, we have a whole line of products that we sell that are based on this special apple.
So we've decided to make this show about the Dolgo Crabapple. Now, I know some of you are probably saying to yourself, wait a minute, didn't they do a show on the Dolgo
have
Crabapple
done
not
that
too
before.
long ago? And you're probably right, we did. But there's
It
never
warrants-
enough
it
to
warrants
say.
more than just one show.
Exactly. There's never enough to say about this fruit. And the reason that we chose it today is a couple things. First of all, Ken and a group of volunteers and actually one of our club members, Matt, who's probably already joined us today. Yes, there he is. We'll get to that in a second. Helped us pick 1,200 pounds of these crab apples today at a local orchard.
They don't weigh much,
No.
or less than a pound, each one of them. So 1,200 pounds means a heck of a lot of these things.
And just last week, you and I were jumping up and down in a tree in Heskey Park,
Right down here.
and we harvested, 175 pounds of these by shaking them out of the tree down in the Meredith Park. So this is the time of the year for the Dolgo Crabapple, and there's so much exciting stuff that comes out of here. So we want to talk about it again, and we are going to do that. Before I do that, let's switch over and just check in with our guests to see who's here with us today. And of course, Matt's here. And not only that, Matt
is really
He's
here.
really
He's
here.
literally here.
He's right back there.
Right over there.
He's our live audience today. That's fantastic. So, and he's with his friend who also came up to join us
Yes.
to help harvest our crab apples, which was really generous of Matt and his friend to do that with us. So thank you so much for joining us. And we have Janice here, and Gary, of course. Thank you, Gary, for joining us again. And Janice wishes she had a can of Dolgo. Of course, we have one right here, which we're going to open in a minute. And Matt wants to know how many different products we make with Dolgo. So we're going to get into that. That's what we're going to cover today. So there's some good questions already. So as always, we just like to start the video with, if you're new to this, if you're showing up for the first time, we'd love it if you'd like our broadcast, or actually subscribe to our broadcast. On Facebook, there's a little bell on the screen. If you click that bell, you'll subscribe to our show and you'll get notice whenever we go live on Facebook. If you're with YouTube, there's a button right there that says subscribe. We'd love it if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, you'll get notified by email whenever we go live. And we're known to go live at the strangest times, like on a bike, ripping down the highway on our triple. We went live.
That was fun.
We've been live on a sailboat, on the ski slope.
On the docks. So if your sailboat is leaning over.
It's exciting for sure, to say the least. So sure, subscribe to us and you'll get to learn about all those times. And then every Monday at 5:30, we are live, either Ken and I and Chuck, if he can make it, to talk about wine and everything related to wine. Certainly centered around what we do here at Hermit Woods, but certainly there's no reason we can't talk about all the other wonderful subjects related to wine from around the world. We've interviewed people from South Africa, right?
Oh yeah, Craig.
Yeah. So stay tuned. We'll
Unfortunately, Chuck could not join us today. He was en route to Anchorage, Alaska, but that got sidelined, I think, because of the hurricane hitting the coast.
And he's having a hard time getting back.
And it's too bad, because the Dolgo Crabapples, specifically in this form, is one of his favorites beverages.
And Chuck, enormous amount of credit has got to be delivered to Chuck for
brokering the apples every year.
Yeah. And then he drives trucks and trailers and
he did that
every
just the other day.
Form of vehicles all the way to southern New Hampshire, southwestern New Hampshire, to the Walpole area, and parts of Vermont, to pick up hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds of crab apples.
Yeah, this time he got 1,000 pounds from Scott Farm and 500 pounds from Saxton's.
Yeah.
Spoke to the orchard growers there and people, and just has developed and watched the situation change over years.
Even with all of what he picked up this year and all that you harvested today and what we got out of the park the other day, we still don't have enough crab apples. There's so many things we can do with crab apples, so we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
One more thing before we go back to the topic at hand. Please, if you are here and watching this, make a comment, let us know you're here so we can say hello. And if you have questions, please ask them. We'd love to entertain your questions, and we'll entertain them. We'll answer them live here if we can.
Thought there might be a cheese thing for us, but
oh my goodness,
but there wasn't one there.
What happened?
Lost in translation.
Lost in translation. Well, Geraldine's joined us. Hi, Geraldine.
Very good.
Glad you could join us. Thank you. If any you don't know, Geraldine is my wife, and
his first wife. I'm his second wife.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know.
Put your name out there. Let us know you're here. And at the very least, if you don't let us know you're here, like our broadcast, share it with your friends if you think they'll be interested. We want to get the word out there of some of the exciting things that we're doing here at Hermit Woods and in the wine world. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what we're putting in our glass right now.
Well, right now,
because we do have wine in our glass. So
it's actually a cider.
It's a cider.
Yeah, it's actually a cider.
We make cider.
And, we're going to tell you a little bit about the history of this apple. And cider, I think, is really appropriate to start with. This is a product that first came on our shelves this year.
Which is amazing. After being 10 years in business making wines from crab apples, for the first time we made a cider from
we never had
heirloom cider making apple.
Well, not entirely, because this has been our flagship first hard cider since 2015. We have been making our heirloom hard cider at Hermit Woods, donating 5% of the sales to the Humane Society. And once a year, we would have a bunch of cats and kittens here for adoption.
And
firewood for sale, which no one ever bought.
Never sell.
But the cats and kittens got adopted. And so that vintage of product has always had some crab apples in it, because reading about how people used to make hard cider here in New England in the 17 and 1800s, they would use some of these apples in with their hard cider. A blend of apples typically would make engaging cider. There are some apples that you can do as a straight varietal, like this crabapple, Kingston Black, Roxbury Russet. There are some types of apples, just like there are in the wine world, Pinot Noir or Chardonnay, can be used on their own and make a very engaging, interesting wines. But as you've mentioned many times, and as you all know, many wines, Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot or Sauvignon Blanc, they may be a blend of different grapes. Likely a blend. Mostly a blend.
So let's stop for a second before you go. Let's dig a little deeper, because this is a fascinating story to me. This is one of the most, I've learned so much since we've been in the wine business.
We didn't know what these were.
We didn't know what these were. So we did some research, and like Ken said, in the early days, in the 1800s, these were brought over to the U.S., actually from the Kazakhstan area, to add flavor to cider. And they became popular for a lot of reasons. Actually, they became popular for cider. They were made into jams and jellies. They're really
You made a jam out of this, a jelly out of this once. It was
fantastic.
Really good.
I wish I had the time to make more.
Yeah.
And sadly, these are not as easy to find these days, because Smuckers, who used to make jams and jellies out of Dolgo Crabapples, now uses
had orchards growing them.
high fructose corn syrup
and a few flavorings.
Crabapple flavoring from New Jersey. Oh, that's so sad. So sad. But anyway, so these are an heirloom apple from a part of the world around Kazakhstan. And what I learned further, which is really amazing to me, is that almost all apples in the
Didn't
world.
they all come out of Kazakhstan?
Almost all apples in the world. Now, at one point, they thought all apples in the world came out of the Kazakhstan area. And now there's been some further science that have suggested they've got DNA technology now. So they know that there is at
Must
least
be regions in China or elsewhere.
there's a
that
couple others. There's only a couple, though.
Yeah.
And the majority came out of Kazakhstan. So while I dug into this a little bit, and it's fascinating. So at one point during one of the ice ages, when the ice migrated further south than ever before, it basically wiped out all the apple trees on the planet, except for this one area that didn't get affected by the ice age. So the trees were able to continue to grow and survive during those very harsh and cold times. And that's why the only way we have apples anywhere, any kind in the world, is they survived in this small pocket of the world. And then since then, people like Johnny Appleseed and whoever else have been taking parts of the seeds or the clippings from those trees and spreading them around the world, because we all know how much we love apples. So why not spread them around the world? So that's why apples have proliferated the planet again, because a few trees survived the worst ice age. It's so fascinating to me. And so that brings us all the way to today, to this little bowl of Dolgo Crabapples.
So we found, we didn't know anything about Kazakhstan and the apples and the rest of it at all back in 2007. Bob and Chuck and I were exploring making wine out of grapes that we imported from California. And then we started looking at what grew well around here to see if we could make wine out of it. And I know we all tell the story slightly differently, but there was some day in late August where we went over to Bob's house when he lived over in Samberton to go for a mountain bike ride.
Where the winery started.
And in his front yard was a little decorative apple tree, little white flowers in the spring, and these beautiful little cherry-like red apples dangling down from the tree.
Which just interrupt for a sec, decorative is key word here, because the reason that we still have these around, one of the main reasons is that the Dolgo Crabapple is a really well-known decorative tree. It's planted all over.
I see them in front of Starbucks and different
everywhere.
places.
People love them. They have a great flower in the spring, and they have a really wonderful, colorful fruit in the late August. So you're coming up the driveway on your mountain bike.
Yep, and saw these little things and said, "Oh, I wonder what that tastes like."
Because that's what he says every time he sees fruit hanging from a tree. I know.
It's the only way
really
you're
good.
telling.
Yeah.
So they're super appley. They're really concentrated.
Really sweet.
They have more sugar in them than most apples, but it doesn't seem like it because they're also really tart.
Yeah.
And then the thing that got me so keyed into trying to make wine out of these is that intense, grippy astringency from the skin.
On the skins, it's
Just
tannins.
like a grape.
Yeah.
Just like a Cabernet Sauvignon, big, grippy grape.
Really good.
You just have it. They're great. So back in 08, we harvested some of these apples off of his tree and threw them in a bucket with some water and sugar and chopped them up and fermented the whole chopped up apple and made this apple wine. Figured maybe we waste a little time. And
The whole tree produced enough for what? A carboy?
Well, yeah,
Or
5 gallons. That was
5
it.
gallons.
And it was fantastic. It turned out to be this rosé-like wine.
That's the one we should have started.
Which became our-
started the story.
Well, we can open that up and
No,
drink
no,
it. I know
no,
that
we
is
need
the
to get to
start,
your-
but
That's right. We're going to
But
get
that's
to
how
that.
it got started. Was our heirloom crabapple wine.
It's we
from the
call
very
this our
beginning.
signature wine.
Yeah.
We've been making this probably longer than
Anything.
anything we make here.
Yep.
The
first year in 2010.
that was
we
the first year
included-
you made this?
No, we made it in 07.
Yeah, that's what I
But
thought.
we made it commercially
in 2010.
right out of the gate at
Yeah.
2010, and we've made it every single year.
And it's been an award winner for us. It's
And
got
it's been an award winner.
A few medals.
And been all over the place. And now it's morphed into different products as well.
and
But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit there.
Let's go back to what we're drinking.
Go back
now.
to the cider, because both this cider and the heirloom cider speak to the history of New England. This is what grows well here. This is what people discovered centuries ago as a really nice beverage. And I got to tell you, I love drinking hard cider. It is, I know you love ending a workout or something with a beer, but I love a hard cider too. It's a great, great beverage. It's different than a beer.
It's
for
different
sure.
than a beer, but I'm gaining an appreciation for it as a substitute for a beer, or a replacement for a beer.
Yeah.
There are times when just like the other night, you sent me your text. My text the other night, I was enjoying a hard cider or two during piano night, and I typically would gravitate toward a beer at the end of the day, but I said, let me have a cider today.
Yeah.
And it was I just crushed it. It just so
it's
easy
definitely
to
crushable.
drink, so enjoyable.
Yep.
So yeah, no, I'm a fan of cider, but there's a time and place for everything, and there's so many choices.
Yeah.
When you sit down and think at the end of the day or whatever, when you get ready to have your first drink of the day, the options are so vast between cider and mead and beer and all the flavors of each and wine and whatever else.
So this is such a versatile fruit. On its own, I did early on, we made a pure Dolgo ferment that we then cryogenically distilled. Remember we had a
Oh yes, I still have
crabapple
some of
ice?
that.
No way.
I do.
But it's a very intense thing on its own. So when we make a hard cider or a wine out of it, we dilute it with some water, which of course dilutes the sugars. And we make up some of that with sugar or honey. We also make a sizer out of these crab apples, which is a honey-based wine with these crab apples. We should try those side by side, actually. I'd like to do that.
Yeah, we should
See what they're like.
So let's talk a little more
So-
about this particular
so
cider.
this particular
is
cider,
really good. This is, I think, your best cider. No.
I'm glad you like it so much. I like this cider a lot, but my deepest love is for the regular straight heirloom cider.
Really?
It doesn't sell as well. People don't like it. We sell the cranberry cider more. We sell this more. We sell wild blue more now.
Well, and
But
clearly,
the heirloom cider, to me, is a much more complex, interesting, and engaging cider. If I'm looking to just crush something, I went home last night and put some cranberry. I got home and Maya and I were talking, and that was something that was just really enjoyable to drink. But if I'm sitting by the wood stove in the wintertime with a book, if I'm not drinking 3 honey wine, then a regular bottle of cider is what I really enjoy.
And we talk about that all the time. And everybody's always asking me during wine tastings, what's your favorite wine? What's your favorite? What do you like to drink? It's always fascinating to me the things that go through my head when I first try to come up with what am I going to have to drink tonight. And typically it's, 4 or 5 o'clock. It's the end of the day or getting to the end of the day before I crack open the first alcoholic beverage. And there's so many things that go through my head. What am I going to be doing tonight?
Right.
What am I going to be having to eat? Who am I going to be with? What's the weather like? Right. All these things start playing into my head, and I think about beer, wine, spirits.
To me, it's just like pulling up Sonos, trying to figure out what I'm going to listen to.
Exactly. We play that
very much like that,
and I think
they're emotionally engaging. They fill a slot. You're looking for a beverage, but they fill a slot, and that slot is part of your experience at that time.
Right.
So you think about the components of that experience. What is the makeup? What are the surroundings? And what's going to dovetail into that perfectly? So this is, a blend of these crab apples chopped up, floating in a sweet cider. So sweet ciders are made primarily
So this has a sweet cider base?
So this is a sweet cider base.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is a sweet cider base. Like our cranberry cider.
Okay.
And our blue apple cider.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense.
Might
be too intense.
When we make this crab apple wine, we take the crab apples and they're in a water sugar base. And we bring the sugar levels up to make 12% or so alcohol, like a full-on wine. With this, we're looking for the natural sugars of the cider. It ends up being around 7% alcohol. The sweet cider is mostly made out of Macintosh apples, which are easy to grow. They grow really well here, and they have a high juice output per tree. So farms grow that. This is from Apple Hill Farm outside of Concord, Chuck Souther's sweet cider. And then it's with these Dolgo Crabapples chopped up, and those co-ferment. There's no sugar added to it. I do add a little bit of sugar before it's bottled to kind of balance that tanginess. But not to where it becomes cloyingly sweet, so that we have that crushability to the cider. I mean, we're almost done with the bottle, so
yeah, it's terribly crushable.
Easy drinking.
So a couple things I wanted. There's so much to talk about. We're going to need more than an hour. This came late to the game because crab apples have been so hard to find. And it's truly, we looked high and low across the country. We called all of the big apple growing states all the way out to Oregon and find out, is anybody growing this apple? And for the most part, nobody is growing it commercially. There's a handful of people growing it commercially, and most of those are just for the specialty jam and jelly market, not for the wine industry. And then we did find there's a couple other uses. People use these as pollinators. So they'll surround their orchard because they're great pollinators. The flowers are really attracted to by the bees. And also they surround the orchard with them because they have such a huge crop. They're a very high cropping tree. And the deer will stop to eat the crab apple before going in the orchard to eat the money crop.
Right.
So
it was a barrier,
for that reason,
natural fence.
Many of the orchards that I spoke to in New York and in South Dakota and Oregon said, oh yeah, we have those, but we don't pick them.
Right.
And they wouldn't pick them. Right. They're hard to pick. They're not easy to harvest.
And apples don't give you much money.
Right.
$1.50 a pound. It's not easy to pick a pound of those.
Right. So we were not able to find very many orchards willing to work with us. Thankfully, there's a couple down in like I said, Walpole, where we get much of our apples.
Yep.
And thankfully, Stone Mountain.
Yep.
This new orchard opened up about 5 or 6 years ago in Belmont.
Or Belmont, yep.
This guy, Scott Roth, opened this farm. Joe Roth, I'm sorry, Scott's his brother.
Although his brother Scott was there today.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he was out pruning the Dolgos before the lower branches that were down low. We got snipped off some of those, so I got to check in with Scott.
Excellent. So Joe started an orchard, and we heard that he was putting in this orchard down in Belmont. It was a new orchard, and we asked if we could, if he would be willing to work with us and plant some Dolgo trees because we couldn't find enough Dolgos. So really, the moral of this story is the reason that this cider showed up now after 10 years of working with this fruit is we barely have had enough fruit to make crabapple. And so we didn't have any excess fruit to make anything different with it.
So here's kind of a sad story too, that
No.
we're down to just a few cases of this, and we're not making that this fall because we don't have enough Dolgos. It comes and goes. That's part of the situation
cyclical.
here. We didn't have sizer for many years, and so it varies.
So
it fluctuates a
It's
bit.
cyclical too. Like the tree in my yard every other year
Yep.
would be a very poor crop.
Yep.
The town, every other year, there's no crop.
Nothing last year.
Nothing. And 2 years ago, there was nothing before that. So it is cyclical. So next year, we'll probably have a shy crop as well, sadly.
We actually made this in a shy crop year.
Yeah,
Strangely
because
enough.
you had some excess from the year before.
Well, it's because we had excess from the year before.
Yeah, we had
That's
such
exactly
a
why.
big crop that time.
I still have 19 crabapple in a tank.
Yeah. So maybe there's hope. We
There's
you
hope.
never know. Don't lose hope.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to mention while we're on this label is both of these labels. We got to work with this woman, Deb Lucky,
And the can.
and the can. Deb Lucky out of New York. She's a children's book artist, and I knew her through her relationship with my father. She had done some work in the graphics world with my dad, and I got to meet her, and she let me know she always wanted to make a wine label, and I said, well, geez, I think I can help you with that. And as soon as we decided to launch cider, we called Deb up and said, can you do our cider labels?
And she came up with the Firewood and Kittens. That was the first label that she did.
Yeah, so
She's done 6 of these now.
She's done 6 of them, and she did the label for our crab
All 4
and all of
cans.
our cans.
All 4 cans.
All 4 cans.
She's done 10 label designs for us.
And not only did she design the labels, but the story on the
Right.
back is really cool. This
Each
is
one's
my-
different.
No, the blueberry one is my favorite.
I love that
now.
one.
That's
Yeah,
my favorite
yeah.
story. But they're all different. So if you come into the winery, you should explore the different ciders and read the stories because they're a lot of fun. And she now, her children's book is a series. It's called The Lunch Witch, and it's going to be made into a live action film.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm dying to see what that comes out like. But anyway, so that's some more detail about that particular wine.
Yep.
But this is really easy to drink, crushable, as our
Right.
Greg would
yeah,
like to know, and just so brilliantly put together, and it tastes great.
What I find amazing
is it's
to me
clear.
is working with this fruit is the nuance of the aromas. I don't know, there's like a spice, like a Middle Eastern spice from Kazakhstan coming off the glass.
Imagine that.
It's almost like an allspice or a cardamom or something like that comes off the nose on this to me. But it's part of that apple, has that spicy aroma. Oh, I'm fermenting some apricots right now for the first time ever. I've never smelled a wine like this before. It's unbelievable. It's spicy. It's like Indian spice on a sweet potato or something. It's orange.
That sounds like another episode.
It's fantastic. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Yes, that's going to be another episode.
So we're going to move on to another wine now. We've covered this one, drank almost the whole bottle. What do you want to go to next? And while you're opening it, I'm going to check in with the audience and see where we're at.
Let's go with our straight up Carolina Crabapple.
All right, let's check in with the audience and see where we're at here. So let's see, Tony Gim.
We got a new person on.
Dino. I can't pronounce his
Chiming
name. I'm
in.
really sorry, Tony.
Excellent.
I'm terrible with pronunciations. You have a really long name, but welcome to our broadcast. I'm glad you could join us today. And Matt has some questions. Let's see. How do you calculate the amount of sugar that you use in the fruit to balance it each year?
That's a great question, Matt. There's 2 uses of sugar in the ferment. One, there's sugar added when I dilute the crab apples with water to make the actual wine, and I'm looking at the alcohol target. I want to make 12.5% alcohol when I ferment the wine. So I calculate that and add the right amount of sugar to do that. There's a formula for it. I can show that to you. And then after the wine has fermented and it's dry, there's no residual sugar, I take out samples of the wine and add little bits of sugar to figure out what tastes balanced to my palate, and share that along with Bob and other people. It's fairly consistent. With this wine, it ends up being around 32 to 35 grams per liter of cane sugar is added in the end, which makes this a semi-dry wine, 3 to 3.5% residual sugar in the wine. And that tends to balance the bright tanginess and the astringency of the skins, so that it doesn't drink like a sweet wine at all.
Right.
Very balanced.
Well, and all of the tannins you pick up in the skin actually leaves your mouth wanting. The tartness and the tannins wanting another sip. It actually dries your mouth out quite a bit. Matt also asked another good question. How quickly do you have to process them after harvest? And considering that there's a team downstairs actually crushing apples right now, as quickly as you can, is in most cases. But although sometimes it's a ripening issue.
So in most ciders, people would pick the apples and then let them sweat. They would pick them into bins and let them sit for a week or two and get really soft and mushy. And the reason they did that is they were making cider. They wanted to get the juice out of the apple. So when you first pick an apple, although it's perfect for eating, it's got a nice crunch, it's a lot of work to squeeze the juice out of that because it's so rigid. So if you let the apple get soft and mealy, you never left an apple on your counter too long. It's still ripe, but when you bite into it, it doesn't crunch. It's mushy.
Yeah.
Well, that's perfect for making cider. You get much higher yield of juice. You grind it up, you squeeze it.
And higher sugars.
And you get off all that, and higher sugars. And you get off all the juice. So people would let their apples sweat for a while. With the Dolgo Crabapples, we are not squeezing them. We're fermenting the whole fruit. So we go right into the processing. So we pick them. They may sit for a day or two at most, and then they get chopped up and put into the fermenter.
And there's a number of fruits that's important. This time of year, as is evident in the cellar, which is very busy right now, there's a lot of fruit that we get, whole, fresh fruit, into the winery, and it has to be processed relatively quickly.
Yeah.
So Greg's joined us.
Very
Great
good.
to see you, Greg. Thanks for being here again. And he made a comment about being so polite. Just raise your hand. They will get to you. So I guess if you have a question, we'll get to you. Thanks, Greg. So let's talk about our Dolgo. This is our signature wine.
It's our signature wine.
Our first real use of the Dolgo Crabapple, our award-winning heirloom crabapple wine.
I got so many questions from the orchards that we spoke to about making wine out of whole apples. They all looked at me crooked. Like, what are you doing? Why don't you squeeze the apples like everybody else and ferment the juice?
You can't do like everybody else.
And it didn't make sense to me. I know it's done in the grape world with white wines, that you squeeze off and ferment the juice. But there's so much flavor and character in the skins. I wanted to be able to control the flavor profile by fermenting on the skins. I can always squeeze it off at any point during the fermentation. But this goes all the way out, just like a red wine. So a lot of the wines that we craft here are made like red wines. The full fruit on the skins throughout the fermentation entirely. And then it gets pressed off at the end and put away into barrel or tanks. Oh, you know what? I've never put some of this in a barrel. A couple years ago when we had so much crabapple wine and I was running out of space in fermenters, I ditched some into 2 barrels for about a month or two, and then I could bring them back out. But most of the time, I take a light toast French oak staves and suspend those in the tank. So this does get a little touch of French oak into it.
What happened to the ones in the barrel? Do you remember?
It got blended in with the rest.
No, but do you remember what the character was, the change? I mean, I assume those are neutral barrels.
They were fairly neutral, and one of the things that I love about barrels is that they clarify wines really well. I don't know what goes on, but I'll take the exact same wine of the same age, it's fermented, part of it stays in tank, part of it goes into barrel. Within a week, the ones in the barrels have dropped their sediment. And the one in the tank is still a cloudy mess. It takes months for it to clarify, and the barrel cleans up.
That is interesting.
I don't know what it is.
Have you talked to Clark about that?
I have not.
You should dig into that. That sounds cool.
So I've wanted to try to do this where I cycle through parts of wines through the barrels just to give them that structure and clarification. So this wine is interesting, and this is not the best example. This particular vintage is 19, and it's quite orange in color. When you ferment the crabapples, they have a beautiful reddish rosé color. And when I was first making this, it would always turn into this orange color. And I wanted to somehow retain some of that bright, true color, if you will, of the fruit. And I found out that by blending in a little bit of our Petit Blue blueberry wine, that I could bring back that original color and also add a more complex flavor profile to it. So now generally when I make our crabapple wine, I put about 5% of wild blueberries into the ferment, and it retains a nice reddish color to it.
So that would make the crabapple a blush.
A blush, yes. And so this vintage 19, I had set aside, 400 pounds of blueberries because I thought I'd get 5,000 pounds of crabapples, but I got 9,000 pounds of crabapples.
9,000?
That's what we did, 9,000 pounds.
Oh my God.
9,000 pounds of crabapples. It was
Think
out of
we
control.
repeat that?
I don't know. If Allison's Orchard doesn't come back, we won't.
Well, Dolgo,
Remember, that's when Chuck had a trailer. That whole trailer filled with bins.
Yeah.
And
What about the 75 trees in Belmont? They're going to get bigger and bigger.
Oh,
right?
they'll keep producing. Yeah, we got 1,200 pounds today from those.
Yep.
So next year that could be 2,000. The year after that could be 4,000.
Yeah.
So we could definitely go up. Although he's got other cideries that asking him for those apples.
Tell them no.
He did tell them that.
Good.
He said, no, sorry, those are spoken for. By Hermit Woods.
Thank you.
Thank you,
We
Joe.
really appreciate it, Joe.
Yeah.
I want to just go back to that. That was a fascinating thing I just learned. I did not know this, and maybe many of you don't either, but the difference is fermenting on the skins of the fruit.
Yep.
And extracting color, the rosé color from the skins for a very brief period of time to bring it just enough to give it that rosé color, but not be a red wine. And blush is when you actually blend a red wine into a white wine and create a rosé color.
Rosé color.
And that's because you're blending, and that's considered a blush. I thought that was fascinating.
This is still
Maryland. Told us that.
this is still a rosé.
Sure. Well,
wine,
rosé is just
because
about
we
color.
get the color out of this fruit. It's just this orange color is not really true to the original ferment color. A lot of it just
So this is a
oxidation.
hybrid.
So this is a blush rosé. I'm not going to try to blend those two words together.
Don't. Good luck with that.
But let's
Especially
do this.
hybrid.
Let's try. I'd like to do this, especially with everyone here. You may not know what a sizer is. A sizer is a whole group of wines, a subcategory of mead. So a mead is a wine where you have at least 50% of the fermentables is honey. And honey is a wonderful product to ferment, and we ferment it a lot with lots of different products.
Our customers while you're.
Yeah. And when you take honey and blend it with apples or apple juice and ferment it, it's called a sizer. When you take fruit, berries, or what have you, and ferment it with honey, it's called a mellow mouth. So there's all sorts of subcategories to meads. What do we got? Any questions there, Bob?
Yes. Janice wants to know if the barrel staves that you use in the crabapples can be used again.
They can, but let's see. It's kind of like tea leaves. So you can make tea in the morning with the hot water
That's
on your
a good
tea,
analogy.
and you get nice flavor out of it. And you could use those tea leaves again for another batch of tea, but it's not going to be quite as floral, a little bit more stringent. By the time you get to a third batch of tea with those leaves, you're really not getting much color or flavor out of them. Same with the oak staves. So in the first batch, the wine pulls out a lot of the oak tannins and sugars from the toasted oak. and subsequent batches would not get much at all. It would be fairly neutral, just like a neutral barrel itself.
Good. And Greg has a long question here. Here's his question. I guess he was the one raising his hand. For lack of better phrasing.
He was being so polite.
Yeah.
See, look at the color on this. That's what I'm talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's a big
That's
difference.
when I had to write down. Okay.
So for lack of better phrasing, we ferment our fruit, mash. Do we bulk ferment it the same? Then part is out to the various products, AKA our main 5 fruits, to standardize, if possible, year in and year out. And then he points out that our voices are cutting out now and then. That's kind of interesting.
I've seen a spinning black screen too occasionally on your laptop.
It's an internet issue. We've been I think there's some issues related to trees down in the area. So
it could be. I stopped for 5 minutes on Chemung Road today. We had a big oak tree across my path. To get to your question, Greg, I asked about is the combination of fruits that are fermenting. And just like in the grape world, some grapes will come ripe at different times, like in Provence. Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, the various grapes have a different ripening profile. They would pick those and ferment them at their peak ripeness. Those would get barreled down. The following year, they would blend those separate components. Likewise here, sometimes I have fruit come in at different times, like my Lake House White. A whole bunch of peaches and rhubarb come ripe earlier than the rose hips and much earlier than the quince. So those get fermented separately and then blended at a later time. Sometimes I'm able to collect the fruit and freeze it, wait till I have all the components, and then co-ferment those. So the fruit are working synergistically in the must during the fermentation together. And there's some attributes that are picked up that's different than if you were to ferment the separate products and then blend them. What I have done as well when I'm experimenting, and I'm not quite sure what the target is, I'm going to have 60% of this and 40% of that, but I know it might be something a little different. I'll end up making a little extra of one or the other and then blending it. So I would do a bunch of strawberries and a bunch of rhubarb, but I might hold a little strawberry and a little rhubarb on their own to the side so that the blend wasn't quite right. I could fine-tune it one way or the other.
I hope that answers your question, Greg. I'm glad Ken understood it. I didn't know.
That was my reading of the. If that wasn't quite right, just chime up again.
No, yeah. So what do we got here?
So this is a sizer, and this is, the color. This was when I had the proper amount of blueberries.
Yes.
For the proper amount of crab apples, and this is the color of the crab apple wine while it's fermenting. It has this beautiful, really reddish tinge to it. And what's different between these two wines is the honey component. So instead of dextrose corn sugar that's used in our heirloom crab apple, that just provides alcohol, nothing else. The honey provides alcohol, but it also adds some flavors and some aromas.
So interesting, they're very similar. Surprisingly, I've never had them side by side, but they're very similar, although I find the one with honey is more perfumey.
I think that's a good word for it. It's the honey wines tend to have
it's perfumey. That's
perfumey character to it.
Whereas the crab apple you get the tartness on the nose. You get the
it's a little more steely and sharp.
You almost get I hate to say this because some people seem to think it's bad, but it's not. It's part of apples, but there's that dirty socks characteristic that comes from apples. And I only get a little of that, much different from other types of ciders and apples, but mostly fruity,
the crab apple,
earthy.
To me, it's just this. Watch it again. I think we got internet issues.
Internet issues.
See, we're pausing a little bit. Sorry about that, everybody. The sizer. Much more perfumey. Not quite as astringent.
It's smoother.
It's smoother.
Yeah.
That's a good word for it.
But it still is very much, if you had done this side by side and I didn't see the bottles and know which
It
way
might
you
just be a
poured it,
vintage difference.
I could have understood this as a vintage difference, which is really amazing because this is 50% honey. And yet the crab apples still are so dominant and so strong in the character of this wine that I could easily mistake it for our heirloom crab apple.
That's really nice. I haven't had this bottle of this for quite a while. You still get that. One of the things I love about these crab apples is that astringency. It sucks your cheeks in at the end. It's like a good grippy Zinfandel or something.
You have to
like
drink
that.
this nice and cold.
Yeah.
That's the best thing. I mean, a lot of times they say, rosés and white wines are served at 45 degrees or thereabouts, but
Well, that's to bring out their subtle aromas. This doesn't have a subtle aroma.
There's nothing subtle about this.
This doesn't need to be warmed up so that you can actually smell it. This jumps out of the glass.
Put this in the refrigerator and drink it as close to that cold.
Put it over ice.
Put it over ice.
Yeah,
exactly.
make it over ice.
Put it a couple cubes on it.
How about that one, Greg? We've got crushable wines and we got wines you can pour over ice. That's a little out there.
Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah. The crab apple wines, the Sizer and the crab apple wines, have two places in my world. A hot summer day, and this is where we should open this one.
You can open the Dolgo. Oh, this is for Chuck.
This is for Chuck.
We'll open this for Chuck.
Oh, did you hear that?
Yeah, that's his.
That's
his
I have a
drink.
picture of Chuck with his Dolgo. It's got to like be on
With
the
his
front
hat?
page. He's got his wild hair.
Oh yeah, his big beard.
And on the boat, and his big beard, and he's got this huge smile, and the Dolgo's out in front. I
remember we did a live broadcast from that boat, drinking Dolgos.
And he's just as happy as can be. He's pounding these babies.
He named his sailboat that.
He named his sailboat it. So we don't have another glass.
No.
But
I can get another glass. That's easy.
So this Dolgo wine on a hot summer day, poured over ice or just chilled down, nice and cold on ice. So refreshing, so easy to drink. Dangerous when you're drinking it out of a can because you can just pound this and it's half a bottle of wine. And
Quite dangerous.
quite dangerous. And then, oh, look at that. Oh, sparkling Dolgo.
Yes.
That's so good.
And that's the same vintage as a 19, of course. We had lots and lots of it there. So similar color.
So-
a little oranger color.
Yep.
And some bubbles.
And some bubbles.
Cheers.
Cheers. The other time to have this is at Thanksgiving.
Oh.
It is so good with turkey.
If you guys haven't had a crabapple wine with roast turkey, you're missing out on one of the greatest synergies that we stumbled into years ago.
Yeah.
We had no idea. I don't know why we happened to drink some of this. Well, we drink a lot of this stuff all the time, this crabapple wine. It's just really easy drinking. Fun wine, goes with every food. But for whatever reason, we were having it once with turkey, and it's like, oh my gosh, I got to eat a lot of turkey and drink a lot of this wine.
And and this is something I learned early on working with the chefs at the Balsams. It's an intermezzo. So I didn't know what that was, but when you have a really fine dining experience, oftentimes the chef will present an intermezzo, which is a food that is meant to cleanse your palate. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's tart and it's crisp and it cleans out the oily and buttery flavors.
If you've had a heavy appetizer with lots of butter and cheese,
Which is what all of Thanksgiving dinner is made up of.
Oh yeah.
One heavy appetizer,
Stuffing
one heavy
and gravy and
gravy, and so
mashed potatoes.
have a sip of crabapple between your gravy and your mashed potatoes or
Cleans it
whatever.
right up.
Cleans your, you get the
Back for more.
astringency and you go back for more.
Right.
So it's the perfect blend. And then we also talk about on my table every year, for those who like a red wine on their table, it's our Petit Bleu, by the way. But we're not talking about Petit Bleu today.
We have Petit Bleu in this. Well, actually,
no.
Petit Bleu is not actually in this anymore. It was originally.
So it was a blush.
No, it's co-fermented with blueberries.
Okay.
So
No, but originally you added Petit Bleu.
I did. So it was a blush rosé. So yes, but now I don't. I used to have to try to plan which batch of Petit Bleu I had and which crabapple I had and which volumes I had of each and make sure it fit in the tank. And now I go past all that So these are co-fermented, Greg. I add the blueberries to the crab apples during the fermentation. Those are going tomorrow, actually, now that I know how many crab apples I have in this batch. Yeah, wine's an agricultural-based product, and so it's very dependent on the productivity of the farms, of the vineyard, of the orchards. And every year we go through this, we don't really know. It's not like a brewery where we're going to order up a bunch of malted barley and a bunch of hops and brew that IPA yet again.
Right.
This is based on what the trees are yielding or what the vines are yielding that particular year at that particular time. If you've got hurricanes and rain, all the fruit swells up with a lot of water, diluting its intensity.
Happens in the grape world too.
It happens in the grape world, and you get a subpar vintage. Other times you have just the right amount of sun, the right amount of rain to really get some great concentrated flavors and it doesn't rain right before harvest, and you get to pick that and make a great wine out of it.
So that was a great conversation vintage. I just heard on a recent wine blog I was listening to, is the difference between terroir and weather. They're two different things.
Oh yeah.
Totally different things. Weather is not terroir. Terroir is what's sort of the norm, what's the consistent norm within that area that involves weather. It's the sort of the climate. It involves what the expectation for the climate is for that region, and the expectation for the soil and the makeup of the soil and other sort of regional characteristics that create the growing environment.
Right. The terroir of Chateau Margaux.
Right.
Are all the microbes, the soil, the vineyard, the airflow, the climate, everything like that. But it's the vintage that really comes into,
which is affected by weather.
By the weather, the most.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating. So there's three. I drank all these side by side.
You did.
Yeah. So go through the line and tell me what are your thoughts about trying the crabapple versus sparkling versus the Sizer.
Well, we were drinking these still products to start off with, and you put this bubbly thing in your mouth, and it just lights up. It's really exciting, really a mouthful. I mean, it just lights up your mouth, and it like you said, it's very cleansing, very astringent. You feel it all the way up your cheeks and gums and around your teeth and everywhere. You can't escape it.
Yeah.
Comparing it to the exact same wine without the bubbles,
it's different.
You get a smoothness, you get really dig in on the nuances of the flavors, you get more of the aroma than you do off the bubbly one. So it's a different product.
So actually, interestingly, that I found this is crushable.
That's the Sizer.
It's crushable. It's so smooth, so easy to drink. This has more layers. The crabapple, the heirloom crabapple. It's got more layers. It's got more interesting things to dig in on to try and discover. But this just tastes so smooth and so easy to drink, but not as complex as the crabapple. That's what I got anyway.
I agree, and historically, I've always found the Sizer to be more complex, but it's not. I agree with you. This crabapple still wine has got some nuance going on that's hard to.
It's hard.
This is a different vintage. This is a 20.
Oh, okay. Well,
so this is different than the 19.
How often have you had them side by side? At least the first time
once before. I've had it once before, but this is it. Yeah.
So in front of us we have the kittens, the
crabapple
cider, the heirloom crabapple, the Sizer,
and the Dolgo sparkling.
And the Dolgo sparkling. We also, these apples will be included in our reserve cider, right? There are some in there, small amount. Yep. Any other products? Because to answer Matt's question from earlier, what do
Mustard?
No, any other wine products? We're jumping ahead.
No.
That's it. Okay.
Yes.
So before we go into the
six products,
the mustard, let's go back and see if we've got any more questions, because I think there's probably some. So Greg, let's see. Before we get to Greg's, let's see. Priscilla had a question. Made it. Better late than never. Absolutely, Priscilla. I'm glad you could make it. Thank you for joining us. And she enjoys the tartness of the Dolgo.
So do we, Priscilla. I think that's really
that's what's
key.
Special about it. Yeah, it's that intermezzo. So Greg says, correct, to refine, AKA 1,200 pounds of crabapple, all fermented together.
Correct.
I said mash, pepper phrase. What is pepper phrase?
Must. Yeah, so now he's getting it right.
Okay. So, yes, must. There you go. How I have X amount of fermented, now I have X amount of fermented juice. Then it gets parted out. Not ferment a certain way for each product.
No, it's not any clearer, Greg. I'm still not getting it. Sorry, I'm
He
reading
must
your
be
thing.
enjoying a glass of crab apple.
Yeah, he could be, or we. I know we
Or
have.
something.
So I'm not really following. But basically, we're not fermenting the juice. We're fermenting all 1,200 pounds of crab apples are in the fermenter. And to those, we're adding 90 pounds of blueberries, a couple hundred gallons of water, and 600 pounds of sugar. And that whole combination ends up with about 2,500 bottles of crabapple wine.
And he mentioned strawberry and rhubarb being separate ferments, but I don't believe they are, right?
Those are fermented together.
Yeah.
So the rhubarb comes ripe a little before the strawberries around here. Those are picked, washed, chopped up, and frozen. And then when the strawberries come ripe, those are picked and tossed into the fermenter, and the rhubarb is added to those, along with some blueberries, and off it goes.
And Judy Hopkins says, awesome discussion on Dolgo. It's products. Love the carbonated version, particularly in the summer. Yeah,
Yes,
that is
absolutely.
clearly on a hot summer day. No better. Greg says, you win this year, crushable Dolgo. At Thanksgiving, just one more thing to bring home.
Yes, it is.
That's
Yes,
okay.
it
You
is.
can ship wine, no
Right.
problem.
Yep.
We'll ship it to you anytime you like. You don't have to carry it yourself. So let's talk about, we have just a few more minutes.
What?
I know, it's an hour.
Really?
Yet again, another hour. You have spent
Oh,
another
my
hour
goodness.
with the Hermits
Wow.
at Hermit Woods. I wanted
You know,
to,
there's so much to talk about.
I know, we could
and
go
so
on and
much
on.
stuff to drink. We should do this every week. Like every Monday,
At
we should
5:30.
get together at 5:30
We
and
should.
talk about stuff. And
I
drink
think we
stuff.
will.
Should
And
we
guess
do
what?
that? Let's do it next week.
We are working on, I think we said this before, but if you're new
Yes.
here, we're working on a
vlog.
No, a podcast. This is a vlog.
This is a vlog.
We're going to turn these episodes into a podcast that you can listen at your leisure. You don't need the visuals, so you can just put it on your phone and put it in your ear, put your
Go for a
earphones
jog
in, go
and-
for a jog or a drive, and hear some of our stories that way. So we're excited. I'm really excited about that because I've been listening to more and more podcasts.
Are you
And
going to
then-
listen to us while you're running?
Yeah, I think so. I think I will. No, I'm excited about the concept of trying to try and pick apart what would it be like to be our audience.
Sure. No, I think that's good. And you know, you all who have been here through so many of these, we're looking for feedback and
Yes.
input
Always.
on what you enjoy, what you'd rather not put up with, what you'd like to hear more of, all that sort of stuff. We're doing this because we enjoy hanging out together and talking about wine because we really like this and drinking, and for you especially to maybe learn a little bit more about what we're doing and have an opportunity to ask some questions about how all this stuff is done and what's so significant about it.
Interestingly, this has been, you know, I have to say, honestly, it can be a little stressful leading up to Monday, worrying about whether we've got our show together or not, because sometimes it doesn't come together until Monday morning. But that aside, this hour of my week is probably the most fun I ever have.
It is fun.
I really enjoy, because I'm learning, it's like learning twice. It's like I've learned the bits and pieces of all of this, but then to sit here and talk about it with you, I relearn it. I learn nuance. You make corrections to things that I might have assumed wrong, and vice versa maybe, and so and then we get your questions, and that adds another layer of interest. It's just, this is one of my favorite times.
I mean, this is kind of what we helped start years ago with our wine club of friends in the area.
Right,
here. We
right.
would get together once a month with a group of friends, and whoever was hosting, let's say it was at Bod's house, and he would say, let's taste Washington State Pinot Noirs. And so everybody would show up with a Washington State Pinot Noir and maybe some food or whatever we were doing for our gathering. And it was a social event. We would get together and see each other and catch up about what has happened over the last month or two in case someone wasn't there the last month. But we would also have out score sheets, and we would brown bag the wines, and we would pour those, and each of us would rate those wines, and it really helped us focus our palates, understand what a Pinot Noir from Washington State tastes like compared to a Merlot or a Cabernet or what have you. And that process was really enjoyable. You and Chuck and I would really dig in on that a lot, and even more so than a lot of our friends would want to do.
Imagine that.
And now we get to do it every week.
Every week.
To where we can really dig in on the differences between three very similar products. And I think that's why this is really enjoyable for us, is that this is what got us into this. And now, 10 years into it, we really have brought it back in a great way.
Quite frankly, I've been immersed in the wine industry now for 10 years, professionally, commercially, and I'm learning more now today than I ever have in all the 10 years I've been. It's really amazing that I can, after all of this time, I can still learn at this rate, at this accelerated rate, and take in new knowledge, and it's really exciting.
So I feel the same way on the ferment side of it.
I see it. I watch you down there. It's how you do it.
I'm changing all sorts.
So
I've got
many variations.
so many new things going on. It's just blowing my mind. There's no just routine thing at all.
No,
it's just like crazy stuff.
And every time I go down there and you introduce, here, try this, try that, taste this out of the barrel, whatever. It's always exciting and interesting, and I just wish I had more time to spend on it. There's so many things that consume our time every day.
And hard. We have challenges just with so many products to keep up with all these different products. I want to drop some of these products, but I don't want to drop them because I like them all.
Well, if you do drop them, they'll come back.
Yeah,
don't worry. So before we leave, we're actually over time once again, but we do use crab apples in a couple other ways, which is kind of exciting to me. Blackwater mustard, which you're probably familiar with if you've been here. This is a small mustard producer out of near Concord. What's the town they're in? Kentucky, New Hampshire. I love this guy.
Steve is an incredible guy.
Steve's an incredible guy. He's really about the earth. He's about the planet. He's about just really working with the raw ingredients and making incredible, amazing things.
So he's where we get most of our rhubarb from. You know that? He's got a huge patch of rhubarb.
I know.
And I get rhubarb from him. But his mustard, I remember trying this for the first time
I've ever had
at a farmer's market right over here in up near where Gordon lived.
Yeah.
Out
Straits Road.
Straits Road.
Yeah.
And
that's where I met him.
I had this mustard and I'm like, it was like wasabi or something. Just this intense heat and spice. I'm like, Steve, what's in this stuff? He says, well, the real key is well-grown mustard, and then it's ground super fine. So he grinds it incredibly fine, so you get intense mustard character coming through. And he's got a wide variety.
I think he's got like eight different flavors, maybe more. And
he does with the crabapple.
He offered to create a Hermit Woods mustard. So he uses our crabapple in this recipe, and it's delicious. You can taste the crabapple in the mustard. So that's another product that we use our crabapple in. Super excited about having that. Thank you, Steve, for making that available to us. And if you haven't tried,
and we use it in our deli.
We use it in our deli. Yep. We sell this in our shop, and you can find it at farmers markets and other places around New Hampshire. You should seek it out. It's a great mustard.
Highly recommend it.
And then, unfortunately, this particular jar is made with our Winnipesaukee Rosé, which is certainly a good thing. But Laurel Hill Jellies actually produces...
They do a crabapple one.
They do a crabapple. We do, every now and then we'll have it. We switch between a couple of different wines. We have a strawberry rhubarb, a rosé. We have a Petit Bleu. She makes these wonderful jellies out of the wine itself, and really the wine comes through in the jelly, and we sell them in the shop as well. She sells her Laurel Hill jellies all over New Hampshire. She's a wonderful lady. I love her to death. Talk about small and local and handcrafted. It doesn't get any more small and local and handcrafted than that. So those are a couple other things that we use our crabapple in. I know that they use it in our in recipes in the deli. There's a couple things that they've made over the years as a dressing that they make with the crab apple.
Hey, I got a question. Think anybody has created a mash out of crab apples and then distilled that?
Geez, I don't know. I wonder if we'll ever get to find out.
Wow, wouldn't
That's an interesting
like
concept.
a Dolgo brandy?
Yeah. We ought to open a distillery.
We should open a distillery.
Yeah,
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be cool.
A Dolgo brandy.
Yeah. Ooh. So stay tuned. Wow. You never know. That could happen. Pretty ambitious here at Hermit Woods. So that brings us to the end of another absolutely action-packed, fun-filled Monday afternoon. I hope you felt the same way. I certainly did. I hope you enjoyed spending your evening with us, and I hope you have some crabapple wine to enjoy after you leave the broadcast. But as always, we thank you so much for being part of this experience with us. It's really as much about you as it is anything else, and we really appreciate it. So thank you. We will look forward to seeing you all next week at 5:30. And
I won't be here actually next week.
I might be alone next week.
Yeah,
so.
but I could call in. I've done this before.
Ken's going to call in. See you next week, 5:30.
Yes.